So we're gonna solve this equation that has fractions, and the way I'm gonna approach it is to get rid of all of the fractions. I'm gonna show you kind of two ways I could get rid of the fractions. The most conventional way is to find the least common denominator for 5, 2, and 6. Remember, when you find a least common denominator, one way is to list out the multiples. So for example, for 5 times 1 is 5, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, 20, 25, 30, keep listing. I could do the same thing for 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, until I get to 30. And for 6, I could do 6, 12, 18 until I get to 30. Notice the first number that all three have in common is 30. So now that I have the least common denominator, I'm gonna multiply both sides of the equation by 30. So I put a big set of parentheses around the left side and a 30, and a big set of parentheses here, and then my 30. Now on the left-hand side, because of this subtraction, I'm going to need to distribute that 30 through. Let's think about multiplying by a fraction as you're multiplying by the numerator and you're dividing by the denominator. But I find it to be a little bit easier if we divide by the denominator first and then multiply by the numerator. Okay, so when I take 30 times 7 over 5, I'm thinking of that as 30 divided by 5. Yep, 6, and then 6 times 7, 42. So we have 42x. Okay, and then 30 times negative 5 over 2. Positive times negative, we know it'll be negative, but we're dividing by 2 and multiplying by 5. So 30 divided by 2, good job, 15, and then 15 multiplied by 5 is gonna be 75. Okay, on the far right side here, go ahead and bring down my equal sign. And then when I multiply by negative 7, 6, negative times positive is a negative, but you're taking 30 divided by 6, which is 5, and then 5 times 7, 35. Okay, now this equation looks a lot easier to solve. Letters on one side, numbers on the other, so I'm gonna add 75 to move the numbers over. What I do to one side of the equal sign, I do to the other. So what's left over here on the left is the 42x, and then negative 35 and 75 make 40. Lastly, I'm going to divide both sides by 42, and then these 42's cancel out, so I have x by itself, and when you simplify that fraction, these are both even, so I could divide them both by 2, and that's going to make that 20 over 21 for my final answer. So x equals 20 over 21. Okay, now the way that I went about this one was to do all of this work right here to find the least common denominator. But frankly, this is a lot of work sometimes. And so worst case scenario, a little bit faster might be just take all the denominators and multiply them together. Now, if you get that number and it's an enormous number and you can maybe think of a number that they all fit into that's smaller, then use that smaller one. But worst case scenario, again, just multiply both sides by all of them multiplied together. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that just so you see the contrast. It's really not that different. So I quickly take the numbers 5, 2, and 6, and I multiply 5, 2, and 6 together, and that gives me 60. If you remember last time we used 30. Okay, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 60 instead of multiplying by 30. Distributing the 60 through on the left side. Again, remember when you multiply by a fraction, you're dividing by the denominator and multiplying by the numerator. So I'm gonna go 60 divided by 5, which is 12, and then 12 times 7 is 84x. The reason why we're clearing these fractions is because on the state test, we don't have the A, B over C button. Our calculators won't do fractions that we're able to use. But we are gonna have a calculator that can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So I'm not really afraid of multiplying big numbers. So even if you needed to take your calculator out and do 60 divided by 5 times 7 to make that go fast, then 60 times negative 5 over 2, positive times negative is negative. Then 60 divided by 2 is 15, or excuse me, 60 divided by 2 is 30, and then 30 multiplied by 5 is 150. Positive times negative is negative. Let's bring down the equal sign. Okay, and then multiplying these together, 60 divided by 6 is 10, and then 10 times 7 is 70. It was negative times positive, so it's negative 70. I'm gonna add 50 to move the numbers to the other side. Then I end up with 84x equals 80. Divide both sides by 84. And this time, this is really the biggest contrast, is in the end, what you have left to simplify is a little bit bigger than what we had before. But simplifying this, 4 fits into 80 and 4 fits into 84. So 4 fits into 80 20 times, 4 fits into 84 21 times. And we end up with the same answer, 20 over 21. Okay, so big takeaway is multiply both sides by a common denominator. But if you want to multiply by just any number that they all fit into, that'll work.